The nail-biter between the Nets and Clippers on Sunday ended in controversy after Kawhi Leonard was whistled for an offensive foul on James Harden and what turned out to be the game-saving play for the Nets. Afterward, a frustrated Paul Pierce said, quote, "It's smart. They control the refs. They got the refs in their pocket. So kudos to the guys who are great at that part of the game." Well, the league is backing the referee's in-game decision, saying the call was correct. Rick Bucher, you think this Clippers team is mentally tough enough to contend this year?
I do, and it feels good to be back to beat up J Mac Day as opposed to beat up Chris Broussard Day. It feels like the universe is back on its axis the way it's supposed to be. I certainly believe that they are mentally tough enough, and I don't believe that their issues with the call are a reflection that they're not. Fact of the matter is, the referee who made the call, and again, I heard you earlier, Chris, I agree with you. I don't care what the league says. The referee who made the call could not see the contact. He was looking from the baseline. And I know he checked with the other referee before he made the call, but ultimately, he's the one who whistled it. He couldn't see the contact. He was guessing. And they tell the referees, do not guess on these. Look at the baseline call. Who's the referee who makes the call? Now, he glances at the other guy, but he can't see it. He's looking through James Harden's back. It's impossible for him to call that correctly. That said, I don't believe that it's mental toughness that's going to determine how the Clippers season goes. It's going to be selflessness. And that specifically when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, because what I've seen with them so far, and saw it in their meltdowns in the bubble, is that when they play through Kawhi Leonard, they play too slow. And as LeVar mentioned earlier, like it becomes too predictable. It's almost like take a number, it's my turn, now it's your turn. The offense flows much, much better when they play through Paul George. And so Kawhi Leonard, if he wants to win again, he needs to get back to that lunch pail mentality that he had in San Antonio and even at times in Toronto, where it's, I'm going to be the claw. J-Mac, you talked about their issues closing games and defensively closing games. Big reason is that Kawhi Leonard accepts switches all too easily. There's not even a screen set. The guys just pass, and Kawhi passes off the most difficult offensive player to guard. I want Kawhi Leonard utilizing his defensive ability and concede that the offense is better run through Paul George. I don't know if he's willing to do that because, as we've seen with so many stars, LeBron went through the same thing. I think KD is looking for the same thing in Brooklyn. Oh, so I've won rings, but I won rings by somebody else's design. It was their blueprint. I want to go win a ring, and I want to do it my way. Well, my way is not necessarily the best way. And I think for this Clippers team, they need to shift some roles and accept that if they're going to get the most out of what they have. I don't know if they have enough to get it done, but that has to happen if they're going to have any chance.
J-Mac, go ahead since he called you out.
Well, no, I mean, listen, Rick, I understand what you're saying. I guess my issue would be, you know, Montrezl Harrell left town, and then all of a sudden you hear the stories about, well, listen, this team didn't want to practice last year. They adjusted everything to cater to their stars, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And that grit and grind narrative they tried to build, remember, with Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell a couple years ago, that's out the window. What is the identity, Rick, right now of the LA Clippers? Like, you can't tell me what it is because they don't have one. This is a team right now that's kind of like, hey, as you said, let's throw it to Kawhi Leonard. Let's do slow on offense. Last year, the identity was supposed to be, they're dogs. We're gonna stop you. And I gave out the number. They're dead last in defensive rating in the clutch minutes this year in the NBA, worse than everyone. Like, what is their identity? What is the Clippers' identity?
Well, let's not forget that we had the shutdown for 3 months, and then Montrezl Harrell had some personal issues with his grandmother dying, that when he came back, he's an energy guy, and he was clearly out of shape. He was not a factor for the team in the bubble, and maybe that whole grit and grind reputation was a little fugazi. It wasn't legit. I like this team and its composition much better than I do last year. Serge Ibaka is an upgrade from Montrezl Harrell. He's experienced. He's more skilled. He's more level-headed. He doesn't play on emotion the way Montrez does. And I believe that Luke Kennard is a huge, huge upgrade from Landry Shamet. Landry Shamet was knocking down shots left and right until you got to pressure situations. You can count on Kennard, or at least they've been able to so far, in terms of having up and down minutes, but being ready to knock them down when you ask him to play that role. So, again, I don't know if they're good enough ultimately to get it done. And you make a fair point. Like, I don't know what their, what their brand is at this point. But I do like the composition, and I do like the fact that last year everybody anointed them from the very beginning. When Kawhi and Paul George got there, they were suddenly the team to beat, and they hadn't accomplished anything. And they seem to be reading those press clippings. They seem to believe that themselves without having to prove it. Now they're in a different category. Now everybody, no matter what they do, is going to doubt them till the very end. And I believe that that's going to work to their advantage.
They don't. Their brand is a finesse team with a lack of leadership. That's what it is. And what that looks like in terms of mental toughness, that verdict is still out. But again, if you're going to be a finesse team, I think of the Houston Rockets. They were a finesse team. Clyde Drexler, finesse. Hakeem the Dream, finesse. But you had Mario Elie, you had Vernon Maxwell, you had some dogs out there that were really willing to get dirty with it. I don't see that with this Clippers team, and I don't see the leadership that you would have saw from Clyde Drexler or from Hakeem Olajuwon. This is a team that is a finesse team that doesn't have dogs to go with their finesse and doesn't have leadership. Chris?
I think one thing you guys are doing, the detractors, LeVar and J-Mac, you're looking at what happened in the bubble against Denver as that's who they are.
Okay.
And granted, that happened. They dropped that 3-1 lead. There's no doubt about it. They didn't want to be in the bubble, but that should not stain them and define them going forward. We've seen, I mean, Steph Curry dropped the 3-1 lead. Kevin Durant dropped the 3-1 lead. James Harden has dropped the 3-1 lead. We've seen LeBron struggle at times in the finals. We saw Magic Johnson. Like, I can point to virtually everyone who had moments like Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers had during the bubble last year against Denver. So I'm not going to define them by that. I think they have the opportunity to change that narrative.
All right. Is Boogie on his way back to L.A. again? We'll discuss that next.